So I'm just going to wait a few more moments for people to come into the webinar. All right, well, I'll get started here. I want to welcome everybody today to the first in the 7-part webinar series titled Critical Questions in Soil Carbon Sequestration. And today we are very happy to welcome 2 dynamos who have been active in this space of advocating for producers in the establishment of environmental policy. And I just want to give you an overview of how we're going to spend the next hour. We're going to first hear from Renata Brillinger, who's the executive director and co-founder of the California Climate and Agriculture Network. Our second speaker is Lauren Lurkins from the Illinois Farm Bureau. So we're really fortunate to hear about climate and carbon policy as it's developing in these 2 really different regions of the United States. We'll have a 20-minute presentation from each of them, and then we'll have about 8 minutes for question and answer. And I want to invite you to use the questions portion of your control panel in this webinar platform. Let me see, there we go. And then we've also set up a discussion board that will be durable after the webinar is over. So you are invited to participate on that. That's on the International Soil Carbon Network website. The link is shown there, and Jenny's going to also put it in the chat for you to access. And so we put some questions there for you to help us answer, to synthesize what we learn here and come away with some takeaways that we can share with the rest of our community, our carbon community who can't attend today. And without further ado, I want to introduce our first speaker, Renata Brillinger. Unfortunately, we're having technical problems and we can't get her webcam working, but she's still able to share her slides and give her presentation. Renata is, as I mentioned, executive director and co-founder of California Climate and Agriculture Network, which has passed their 10th year in developing national, state level and national policy to advance agricultural climate solutions. And she has over 30 years of experience in nonprofit administration. So Renata, I am going to pass the torch over to you.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'll just get the screen, my presentation up. You can let me know if you see my first slide. Can you see that, Claire, the opening slide?
We see it in edit mode.
Maybe there's a lag, so because it's in presentation mode on my screen. Still in edit mode?
It's still in edit mode. See if there's another option for PowerPoint application that you can share. Like if you go into show applications, yeah, there we go, great.
Okay, it's not my day for technology, clearly. Well, thanks again for having us on this discussion. It was very impressive turnout you've got here, and clearly an interested audience. And I really appreciate the questions that were sent in advance as well. We'll see what we can do to get through them. I'll just jump right in with a little bit of background about CalCan. We're a coalition of sustainable and organic agriculture organizations, and I thought I'd just share a little bit about our approach to this work. Some of the underpinnings of the assumptions we make and the sort of theory of change we use to do the work. So we're advocates, and we see policy as a powerful lever for transforming agriculture and making it viable and resilient and sustainable into the future, economically, ecologically, and in terms of equity and justice as well. All the work and all the policies we advance are grounded in scientific data, peer-reviewed science. We have a science advisory committee that makes sure that what we're advocating for actually has demonstrable benefits to, agronomically and environmentally. And we really rely on a big network of partners. Our work is collaborative. We're trying to bring together the wisdom and experience of farmers and ranchers, and also scientists, and also technical service providers, so that the solutions we advance actually can be realized on the ground. And we also rely on a lot of other kinds of partners as well to inform our direction and our strategy. We're very farmer-centered, so we do a lot of listening to farmers. We have a farmer and rancher advisory council, as well as our science advisory council. And we have farmer partners around the state, and you can see some of them, a very small number of them here, on some pictures with some quotes about the work that they're doing to deliver climate benefits on farms and ranches. We focus on incentives rather than sort of taking a regulatory approach to mandating what farmers have to do. We feel like incentives are going to be a more constructive way to move forward. And we are looking always for solutions that solve a number of problems, not just climate change. So, of course, we recognize the importance of, for example, of sequestering carbon in soil, but we're also looking for and considering the other challenges in agriculture that those kinds of practices that sequester carbon deliver. Things like improving air and water quality, improving the working conditions on the farm, making the farm more resilient to all these challenging impacts of climate change. So we see agriculture as a very powerful solution center for addressing a number of challenges going forward. The context here in California is very specific and fairly unusual in terms of looking across the country, and even in the world. I would say that there's been a lot of attention paid here in the state to setting very bold mandates for various climate strategies. The most recent being a commitment to achieve carbon neutrality by the year 2045. That's across all of the economy. And then the governor here last fall took another step and issued an executive order that directed all the agencies in the state that work on natural resources and land-based departments they were all directed to achieve a goal of 30% of the land and coastal waters in the state protected, conserved by the year 2030. So to achieve either of these goals, it's clear that agriculture has to be part of the solution. It's such a big land use activity in the state, and it's a big economic driver, and it's got such potential for helping achieve carbon neutrality that we really have to figure out how to accelerate the pace. So we have a number of thoughts about how to do that. The first the overarching framework I would offer as to how we approach this is that we really need to combine and accelerate resources that deliver more research, so we better and better all the time understand where the most powerful solutions are. We also think it's critical that there's resources, funding, and good science upon which to base the technical assistance that's delivered to farmers. That's these are in some cases practices that are unfamiliar or out of use or newly understood. So there has to be that bridge between the science and the practice, and that's what those technical assistance providers deliver, as well as providing practical support in designing projects on farms and applying for funding and then doing the reporting and paperwork. These are all important pieces of the TA role. We think demonstration projects are critical as well, because farmers, we know from social science research, learn best and are most likely to make change when they see what other farmers are doing and when they learn from their peers. That's their main source of information. So funding demonstration projects that support farmers and having others come onto their property and see how the practices are working is really important. And then the last kind of tool in the toolkit is financial incentives, making sure that we're de-risking a transition to practices that have climate benefits. and helping growers invest in some capital improvements or some new knowledge systems that they need, or for example, risking some yield hits as they figure out the new practices. These are all reasons to invest in the form of cost shares or grants. And what all that package of resources can do is deliver a number of powerful types of solutions. And these are just the broad categories of the things that we look to and have worked on. Reducing energy and fuel use is a big way to reduce CO2 emissions associated with actual on-farm practices. Reducing nitrogen fertilizer use, nitrogen, of course, being one of the sources of potent greenhouse gas, nitrous oxide. So trying to minimize and make more efficient the use of nitrogen, whether that's synthetic or organic sources. Improving on-farm renewable energy. California is currently the leading state in on-farm renewable energy production, but there's a lot more to do here and certainly in other places in the country as well. Another big category and a very, very important category is conserving farmland to limit sprawl. If we pave over soil, we have no place not only to grow food, but to also store carbon. So partnering or pairing farmland conservation with smart growth and infill development is a very powerful strategy. There was a study done some years ago here out of UC Davis that estimated that we can avoid very significant emissions and greenhouse gas emissions by doing this, and it showed that the amount of emissions on 1 acre of urban land is approximately 70 to 100 times more than an acre of irrigated cropland. So very, very powerful strategy that has multiple benefits. We need to look at ways to reduce methane emissions from livestock through the handling of the manure. This is a big source of emissions here in California. And lastly, figuring out how to store more carbon in soil and in woody plants. So those scientific principles and validated solution centers have been encouraged here in California with a suite of grant programs that have been launched in the last 5 or 6 or 7 years. I guess we're getting up to close to 7 years for a couple of them. And our track record to date is that there's been over $420 million invested in the form of grants directly to farmers, or in the case of farmland conservation, a lot of those dollars have gone into the sort of intermediaries that broker permanent easements on ag land, land trusts and so on, open space districts that protect that agricultural land in perpetuity. Over 1,700 farms, or projects rather, they're not individual farms. They have received these awards, and you can see that there's been more than 20 million metric tons of CO2 that's estimated to have been reduced. So the 4 types of programs are summarized here. I won't go into a lot of detail about any of them, but there is a lot more information on our website if you're curious to know more about the kinds of practices that are eligible. I'll spend a little bit more time on the Healthy Soils program just because I think that's of interest to this group. So briefly, the Sustainable Ag Lands Conservation Program provides, as I said, grants to permanently protect farmland so that we can retain the many community benefits and ecosystem services that farms provide and limit sprawl. The SWEEP program is an on-farm water conservation program that funds things like improved irrigation and solar pumps, more efficient pumps of all kinds. Soil moisture monitoring equipment is another eligible practice there. These things all help reduce both the water use and the energy use on farms, because if farmers have to pump less water, they use less energy. The Healthy Soils program and the Alternative Manure Management program are 2 of the newer programs. They've been around for, we're going to have our the fourth round of grants this winter. And the Healthy Soils program incentivizes there's 27 different practices that are now eligible for funding under that program. Everything from cover crops and compost to prescribed grazing, all kinds of biodiversity practices to improve the use of like hedgerows or riparian plantings. Strip tilling is another. Various forms of reduced tillage practices are eligible. And then the alternative manure management program basically invests in new equipment that helps dairy producers move from their current practice of flushing the stalls and washing that manure into a lagoon where it's anaerobic and produces methane, to practices that are drier, that handle that manure in a drier form, that scrape and somehow separate solids from the animals in the milking barns and so on, and then composts or at least ages that manure for use on cropland or for sale in some cases. So, and then that program also incentivizes prescribed grazing, getting cows out on pasture more frequently. That's another strategy for reducing methane emissions. So just to go a little bit more into the healthy soils practices realm, this is just a partial list of sort of broad categories of the types of practices that are eligible, and I mentioned some of them already. I wanted to, in response to some of the questions that came in beforehand, I wanted to just note that one of the ways that the CO2 emissions reductions are quantified is through the use of an online tool called Comet Planner that's very accessible to anyone who wants to go take a look at it. It's a farmer-friendly interface of a more complex model called Comet Farm, and that Comet Farm was developed by the USDA NRCS some years ago for the use in their in a similar program, the EQIP program, Environmental Quality Incentives Program. So it's the Comet Farm has been adapted and calibrated for California soils and California crops. Not all of them, but they're working on, you know, continual improvement of that program, continual parameterization of the model. So that's something folks might want to go look at for a little bit of the background and underpinnings to the quantification on this program. Whoops, I skipped a little bit too fast there. I just wanted to just really continue to emphasize the importance of approaching this systemically and looking for multiple benefits. There are many with all of these programs, but with the Healthy Soils program in particular, I just wanted to flag a few of them. It can lead to reduced input costs in the form of synthetic fertilizers or any kind of fertilizer, improved air and water quality. As we do some of these practices, we can see again, you know, decreased chemical use on farms. Sometimes farmers report improved wildlife and pollinator habitat, especially if they're using, you know, installing hedgerows and other pollinator crops. Improved soil fertility, improved resilience, and better water penetration and retention as that soil becomes healthier, the structure improves, it becomes more porous and sponge-like, and so we get better, you know, recharge of groundwater, for example, or at least more saturated soils, so that there's reduces the need for irrigation. This is, of course, of great interest here in California right now with yet another year of drought that we're facing. I just wanted to quickly show or talk a little bit about the value of these programs from the farmer's perspective. These graphs show fairly clearly the pattern of high demand with insufficient supply of funding that's been the case across the several years for the most part of all three of these programs. I didn't put one up for the SALT program because farmers don't apply to that directly. But you can see there's been a tremendous response, and this is in spite of the fact that the funding has been irregular, sometimes interrupted. There hasn't been a regular source of funding for these programs, so there's been a bit of a herky-jerky, you know, feeling, and yet farmers are finding out about it and applying. And some of the reasons that it's of interest to them are listed here. I'm not going to run through them in the interest of time, but there is a, you know, each farmer is making a business decision about whether these are programs that are worth their time applying for and competing for the funding. And the reason they're motivated to do so is certainly sometimes that they're good stewards of the environment and climate, but there's a lot of good sound business reasons as well. that growers show interest and then have positive experience with the actual projects that they implement with this funding. And in an era where we're seeing an aging farming population and increased consolidation to larger and larger farm ownership and land ownership that's not in the control of farmers in a lot of cases, anything we can do to keep smaller, medium-sized farmers on the land and doing these transitioning to healthier practices is a good investment in public funding. So in terms of where the money comes from, this is the last major thing I wanted to touch on. This is a question that I think a lot of states struggle with. I think there's increasing interest and recognition of the importance of these practices and the multiple benefits, but where are we going to get the money to pay for them is always the question. Here in California, we have something called the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is the product of some legislation that passed many years ago in 2006 that established a cap and trade program. It's a fairly unique program here in this country. It's complicated, but essentially what it does is it caps the biggest emitters of carbon dioxide, like refineries, for example, and then all of those regulated businesses have to participate in an auction where they essentially have to pay into this greenhouse gas reduction fund that's then used. It's under the control of the governor and the legislature, and it's used to distribute grants for a whole bunch of different practices that further address climate change. So, recycling programs, forest management programs, electrification of vehicles, solar panels. There's a very long list. Smart growth, infill development, and in the case of those 4 grant programs I showed you earlier, some of that money has gone into agriculture. There are a lot of other ideas, being talked about for other sources of funding, whether they're bonds. Here in California, a couple of water bonds passed a few years ago, and they each had a little bit of money in there for the SWEEP program, the water efficiency program. Again, a California-centric situation at the moment is that we have a huge budget surplus. That's the result of, in part, federal relief funding from the pandemic, and also because of the tax structure here in California and the large number of sort of uber wealthy taxpayers has increased our coffers. And so we've got some money, that one-time money, that we and others are advocating should be in part invested in agriculture. The Farm Bill has a lot of conservation funding in it. It's administered through the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and there are many more opportunities in the future to direct or prioritize some of those dollars for strategies on farms that address climate change. Some of the federal pandemic relief, again, one-time funding, but certainly something that we think should in part be invested in agriculture, because the sooner we get some of that carbon sequestered, the more time we'll be buying ourselves for the very complex other sectors of the economy that need to be reducing their emissions, like transportation, for example. And then there's a lot of talk about private investors, incentives from different corporations, and carbon markets, which are private market trades between emitters of carbon dioxide and farmers. The latter is relatively infrequent, and there are lots of reasons for that. And I think Lauren's going to actually touch on some of the challenges of that kind of an approach to seeking the funding for these investments. I'll just want to quickly note that there's a lot of interest across the country in healthy soils, particularly. It's really captured a lot of imagination. I think that's because there's just an increasing amount of alarm about how quickly the climate is changing and how severe the impacts are. So this identification of the fact that soil and agricultural perennial crops can actually store carbon is has captured a lot of attention of late, because we really need some good news in the climate arena. So there's been growing interest in many states across the country to standing up their own healthy soils programs, and they're all in various stages of progressing through the legislatures, and also at various stages in terms of figuring out that challenge of where the money will come from once a program is established for actually giving out grants. So if you want to dig into any particular state, that website at the bottom will take you into a lot of detail about the status of each of those campaigns. I just wanted to close, hopefully not with too much horrible news, but these are just some images of some of the challenges that we're facing in agriculture. I think the stakes are incredibly high, and not just in California. These play out in differently, but as significantly in a lot of other states, whether it's floods in the Midwest, heat impacts, erratic weather, new pest problems. These are all huge challenges for farmers to adapt to as quickly as they're needing to. And I think in California, being such a significant, massive producer of so much fruits and vegetables, nuts, dairy, beef, the stakes are high for everyone in the country. And we are just really, on our 4th or 5th year now. You could say 7th or 8th or 9th year if you want to go back to the drought that started in 2014, of really significant compounding and increasingly severe challenges, wildfires, drought, labor, challenges, workplace vulnerabilities from our essential workers, and so on. I just want to end, though, with one portrait of Phil Foster, who I think very, very highly of. He's I think an exemplar of the kind of agriculture producer we need for the future. He's been farming for a long time. He wasn't always organic, but he did convert 30 years ago because there was a better premium. He's growing an incredibly diverse array of crops on what in California is considered a sort of medium-sized farm. He produces solar energy. He's using hedgerows. He's producing his own compost. He uses cover crops. He's built up his soil organic carbon level, his organic soil carbon level enormously compared to most other farmers in California. This is a huge increase in soil carbon over a relatively short amount of time through a whole integrated set of practices. And he's currently a part of a cohort of farmers, organic farmers, who are trying to figure out how to do no-till in organic systems, which is very tricky, very hard to figure out how you can do no-till and still control weeds. And so there, after all this time, he's been farming for 40 years. He's still really curious and really leading the way on, how to figure out how to do even better. So there's a lot of people like Phil in California, but I just really am constantly inspired by his approach to the work and to the challenges. So I'm going to end there and welcome follow-up by email if you'd like, or by checking out our website, subscribing to our blog. These are good ways to track the science, the practice, and the policy work that's happening here in California.
Thank you, Renata. And I'm sorry we don't have time to take questions right now, so we'll roll right into Lauren's presentation, but I think it'll make a nice comparison for y'all, and keep thinking of those questions, and we'll have time for some discussion at the end. So I want to briefly introduce Lauren. Actually, Lauren, I'm going to have you introduce yourself and the Illinois Farm Bureau, because I think you'll do a better job. So let me go ahead and pass presenter role to you. Okay. Are you able to share your screen now? Perfect.
All right, you can see everything just fine?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Let me get back here. All right, thanks for the opportunity and a great presentation to follow. Unfortunately, you get to look at me, me too here. So, whoops, let me see what I did. Oh, whoops, okay. Go back. Whoops, it's got me going. There we go. Hopefully you can see the opening slide there. So I just want to start out by, again, saying thank you. My name is Lauren Lurkins. I'm the Director of Environmental Policy in the center of Illinois, in Bloomington, Illinois, and that's in the center of the country. So a little bit different of a perspective, but hopefully can give you some views on what's happening here in the state of Illinois. This picture is one of my favorite pictures. Over the last number of years, we've been doing quite a bit of work on improving our water quality, both in the state of Illinois and the water that leaves our state and ultimately makes its way to the Gulf of Mexico. And in that process, we have a huge program with our county farm bureaus. This is one that's actually outside of the St. Louis, Missouri area, heavy in livestock. And these guys are here in one of our pandemic virtual field days. You can see our video crew guy over to the left. But this was a virtual field day that we did, and they're talking about the role of cover crops for forage. And it's just one of my favorite things, but something that great to start out with to show you a couple of the folks that I work for, and also kind of give you a glimpse into the kind of work that we do. But here at Illinois Farm Bureau, we've actually been around for over 100 years. We've provided education and information to our farmers. We also do quite a bit of advocacy work, legislation, some regulatory work, and I focus, I'll tell you in a minute, a little bit about the work that I do and that of my team. But we are an organization that now is comprised of about 74,000 voting members. That represents 3 out of every 4 Illinois farmers is a member of our organization. I think for this crowd, I thought it would be important for you to know sort of how we originated. And one of the very first activities that was charged by our organization, then called the Illinois Ag Association, was to bring soil and crop specialists to each county to give farmers the latest ag research information and recommendations. So obviously now the world is slightly different. We do work with Extension, and we do partner directly with academics in our state. And hopefully, you know, you'll leave here with a little bit of information on how and why. But we do work with farmers. The leader of our organization, our president, is a farmer elected by his peers. I answer to a board of farmers elected by their peers across the state. But farmers who are members join through at the county level. And I'll tell you a little bit about the role with regard to climate change advocacy and also carbon markets, kind of the role that our counties play in that. And of course, depending on where you're calling or tuning in from, you're part of different states across our country. And many folks, you would have a state farm bureau. Everyone has a state farm bureau, and we are all members of American Farm Bureau. So just kind of connecting those dots. We do everything here at Illinois Farm Bureau based on a policy book. So our members at the county level will solicit opinions on different topics, and then they actually kind of work like a state general assembly, kind of work ideas through committees, and ultimately every year our full delegate body will have a chance to look at our entire policy book and refresh how they feel. So many areas of that policy book actually do touch on environmental policy with regards to life on the farm. And here's just a little list of things. This is almost like my team's to-do list, but we have activity, either regulatory or science support or advocacy in any of these spaces. So I'm happy to take questions offline about any of these other areas. Today, we're obviously going to focus in on the work that we do with regard to global climate change and carbon. And then the second note here is just that every year, with all of these issues happening, our board of directors of farmers will set a set of annual priorities. And for the last number of years, that has included our work to improve the environment. So this picture is another one of my favorites that can give you a glimpse into what our summer usually looks like and will, again, thankfully look like here in Illinois. We spend a lot of time doing field days. they were started to work on showing, sort of like Renata said, the demonstration of a lot of research or things that farmers were trying on their field with regard to water quality. That then morphed into soil health. And so we talk about even the role of carbon sequestration in some of these field days. And the beauty of working for our organization is that sometimes you don't know if you show up and you're going to see a dozen people, or if in this case you're going to turn down the county lane where there is a field day and trucks are completely lined up. So this was a couple years ago, obviously before COVID, but the thing that people were driving to see here was actually a soil pit in a field with cover crops. So you would have thought we had like a rock concert out here in the middle of the country. But really in my role at Farm Bureau, I spend time talking to 3 different kinds of people, sometimes in the same location: farmers, regulators at the state and federal level, and also our scientific community. So it's equal parts being proactive, trying to get work done on the ground, share information with our farmers in the form of education and communication, and then also that policy work. It has been a major priority for myself and my team to build a working relationship with researchers across the state and even outside of Illinois on a range of environmental issues. That way we have the ability to put the best science in front of our farmers, and that can take the form of us serving on advisory boards, us inviting those researchers and their students and their teams in for different kinds of conference presentations. We will talk about their research along the way, as well as ultimate conclusions across our communication platforms, offer focus groups to those researchers as well. So hopefully that can you all still see me here? Okay. So that's just a little glimpse of I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, we can see you fine.
It says my screen has been paused. My screen sharing is paused. 1 second. I think I hit a button.
It may be that you had a pop-up window come up that it wants you to get rid of.
Sorry, guys.
Well, I think we've lost Lauren for a minute. I'm going to turn my webcam on. Let's see. So hopefully she'll be able to resolve what's happening there. But well, to give her a minute, I can punt a question to Renata. So I'm going to riff off of this question that's coming in from Peter Nico, asking about risk associated with yield hits with adopting new practices. And I think the bigger context that we're all trying to deal with is risk management. And Peter's asking, is there an opportunity to de-risk practices by offering specific crop insurance?
Yeah.
And of course, the Healthy Soils program is an incentive program to try and de-risk adoption of new practices. So yeah, I do have any input on what is the best way to de-risk policy-wise to adopt new practices.
Yeah, well, I think grants programs, incentive programs of any kind, and I think Lauren is actually going to talk about the crop insurance bill that passed there, where there's a premium, and then there's also talk, and there has been for some years at the national level in the Farm Bill of looking at ways to require conservation practices in order to qualify for crop insurance, different kinds of crop insurance. And so I think there's a bunch of different ways that policy can be used to do that. So yeah.
Can you hear me again? I got kicked off the platform.
Yes, we have you back.
Okay.
Yes, Lauren, can you pick up?
Can you give me the opportunity to share?
Oh, okay.
Or take my slides. If you can't do that, I can just go ahead. Okay, here we go. Let's see here. All right. I'm really sorry about that.
Oh, we all understand.
Okay. All right. So right back where we started, this is just a small piece of what our policy book says with regard to global climate change. And for this audience, I thought this would be helpful to you. So these are support statements and a lot about the scientific research, the continued, expanding and improving of state and federal voluntary conservation programs, market-based solutions, and increased funding for research. So you see the reference to the need for additional resources, not just for things that help farmers implement, what is recommended, but also that science kind of basing it all. And I'm happy to dig in a little bit more detail into the questions. But this is the voice of the majority of the farmers that I work for. And this was updated ahead of all of this pickup and discussion. So this would have been the winter of 2019 when this was last updated. Let me see if okay. So here in Illinois, we've had quite a few discussions on climate change policy, obviously with the campaign season and then with the Biden administration. We know it's a priority for the Biden administration, and really these discussions are happening at every single level in our organization. And overall, we're very optimistic that ag is being positioned as a solution with a focus on the working lands in our country. We do believe that farmers here, even in the Midwest, in Illinois, that we are positioned very nicely to be a solution and part of the solution discussions in this debate. Our goal as a state farm bureau is to make sure that these initiatives are as beneficial as possible to our farmers who voluntarily choose to participate. And so what we did most recently is we did respond like 2,700 other individuals to USDA's request for comment, and this was all in follow-up to the executive order on tackling the climate crisis. And there were quite a few questions that USDA put out to the public. And the 4 of them here are things that I wanted to make sure that you were all aware of what our membership said. So we took those questions and we turned it around in action requests to our members. We ended up getting 1,100 individual responses to these questions. So in response to the question on how can USDA leverage what they do in existing programs, we heard loud and clear from our membership that they really like the conservation programs that exist through USDA to date. However, when you're thinking about what's out there existing, they do think there could be room for improvement, streamlining the sign up, the paperwork, making them more user-friendly, giving the adequate training out in the county USDA offices to be able to support. It's very complicated, and it's a great asset to have the county level offices, but it also comes with a lift on training. And so there was a lot about, we like these programs, but look at how they could be streamlined and made easier and less cumbersome to participate in. Also, wanting to see additional funding because there is never a sign-up period that goes by in Illinois where there's not a situation where the demand is far more than the money that we have to go around. With regard to the question on what new strategies should USDA employ, there was, a very loud voice on an interest in crop insurance rebates or discounts, not to the degree of making it a contingency to get crop insurance. So that would be some place where, that would make it more difficult. But I think why people in our state are responding to the rebate is because in our state, we actually for 2 years have had a cover crop insurance rebate program through our Department of Agriculture. Our state General Assembly actually just gave a double budget for that in addition to additional resources to our state agencies and our soil and water conservation districts for purposes of climate smart ag / our water quality programs. And so I think people have seen that work. They have been on the end of not, running out of money in the 12 before they were able to get funded, and so they are intrigued by that. We've also heard from the crop insurance industry that was a very easy thing for them to help on, and so we keep circulating right around that discount and rebate concept. The third question that we posed was, how can USDA support emerging markets? And that's the emerging carbon markets. The points coming from our membership there were that USDA should gather opinions from farmers to make this something that would be workable, and not just do what would work for corporate America. So design something for and by a farmer. They also are saying that they need additional, way more accurate data and peer-reviewed science to help them understand what practices can work and how quickly they could work. Also, a very big request for transparency and standardization along all of the contract terms that would be in an emerging market. And then some very clear enrollment. How do I sign up and what do I get for signing up? Also a big push, again, want to emphasize that peer-reviewed scientific literature. And then the final question that we posed was, how can USDA ensure that programs are available to all producers? In this one, we saw a major trend toward wanting to make sure that early adopters were not shut out of programs. They understand the concept of additionality, but these are early adopters that feel like the data that's out there is not reflecting what's really happening on the ground by way of no-till or cover crops in particular, that it's happening and that data is not reflecting what they see in the countryside, and that as early adopters, they would like an opportunity to be able to be part of something like that. So I will say, and I think I just skipped, so with regard to private carbon markets, this is the huge thing for discussion across our organization, and really whenever we do meetings with our board at the state level, or in fact with our county farm bureaus, thankful to Zoom technology that we can do that and spend this week 2 different nights with 2 different county farm bureaus in the state. We talk through these issues, and each time, almost I could bet money on it, they are raising these same barriers. And you all know them, but the verification, who and how are we going to check what is happening on the farm and how much carbon is being sequestered, to additionality, early adopter issues with you need more, and I've already been doing this for a while. Permanence in a row crop perspective. Control. Here in Illinois, we have farmers who own some land, but not all of the land that they own, and they deal with many different landowners and perspectives that they may not be able to lock down control through the course of a 5 or 10-year contract. Financial, meaning they're going to have to pay to take on a lot of these practices that do have significant costs associated with them in certain ways. And then technology. They may not have access to the technology that folks are requiring for them, either in the cab or soil tests or something else, to be able to meet all of these needs. And the overarching concerns are with regard to the kind of data and the amount of data that are being asked for them to participate in any kind of contract, the length of those commitments, and the fairly draconian contract terms that exist in some of these options right now. Frankly, they see the contract in front of them and they don't get even to the second or third paragraph before they say, I can't do this. I'm interested in finding out what this private carbon market would look like, but I'm not willing to give away all of this with so many questions still remaining. So I do think that really does bring us to the next slide, which is many times the question is posed to me, what do the scientists say? And these are the questions here that I wanted to pose to this scientific community, and just tell you, these are the questions that our farmers are asking of us to ask to the scientific community. Where can we do it in the state or country? How can we improve our soil carbon? What's a realistic goal? What's a realistic timeline? How can science help us sort of reduce this cost that we would have to take on in some ways to do the verification? And also this big idea of what is the role of ethics or legal protection in this space, because technology says you could do it, with all of the hacks that have been happening across private companies. That is in the news every single day, it feels like lately, and that is very concerning to our members if they're passing on what they consider very sensitive data into corporate America. Want to make sure that it's being protected. So that's a little outside of the scientific community, but I wanted to put that there because it's a big deal. So that is all I have. I'm happy to stick around for some questions, but here's my contact information, and I'm happy for you to reach out individually as well.
Thank you, Lauren. You've given us a lot of food for thought and a lot of information in there. I guess what I wanted to throw at you guys, one of the common questions that comes up too is, what about paying for practice versus paying for outcome? And what has your member organization been saying on that issue?
Yeah, I can start there. I think it's just such a new, it's a new frontier for them, that they are used to like that pay for practice in a USDA program, but some commitments that have to be made throughout, say, like the life of like a CRP. You have to make sure that you're continuing to do that practice over the term of the contract. But I think the outcome is something that they sort of are listening to me say, and we talk about it in every single presentation. They sort of scratch their head and say, well, how are you going to know? How are they going to verify? And what is the role of like models and assumptions to be made? So I think there is interest, but there are a lot of questions from our membership about just what does that mean for them? What sort of commitments do they have to make? And then what happens if they don't, in fact, make that goal? They work with Mother Nature all the time, and they know that things can very much go astray. And so they're very, a little bit worried about making a commitment that they can't meet down the road.
Renata, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I think similar to what Lauren's saying, the carbon market is more of an outcome approach, that where the farmer has to guarantee that they'll deliver a certain, ton of CO2 reductions, whether that's through sequestration or just reducing their own emissions. And there's many challenges with that. And some of the challenges are some of the reasons the farmers are concerned about signing those contracts. They have to guarantee that they're permanent and that they're on top of practices or additional, to what they were already doing. They have to verify. And in biological systems like agriculture, the verification piece is really tricky. It depends a lot on when you sample and how how precise your sampling is. If you're just doing a simple soil test versus a full gas chamber analysis, of the flux, and who's going to pay for those metrics, collecting that data. If we look at practice-based strategies, which is more what government incentives programs look at, then we have opportunities to achieve multiple benefits, not just carbon-centric ones. So we can look at a whole multitude of reasons to incentivize a certain practice. There's some forgiveness in there. There's some fluidity, because we're incentivizing an approach, not a specific set of ecosystem services delivered, and so that gives some protection to the farmer who isn't ultimately in control of a lot of the outcomes, because as Lauren said, nature is, often is a player in this, and we don't necessarily have a contract with nature about whether or not there's going to be rain that year, that will enable the soil microbiology to, create to pull that carbon down into the soil profile. So there's a lot of reasons that's challenging to do, an outcomes-based approach at this time in the science and in the practice.
So I'm sure, as Lauren was saying, the other issue that comes up all the time is the additionality issue, that a carbon credit needs to be for new carbon newly removed from the atmosphere, and that excludes early adopters who have already built up soil carbon. There's no payment for previously stored carbon. and this creates unfairness. And so I wanted to hear from you guys. I know there's some kind of partial solutions or amelioration ideas for ameliorating this. So I was wondering if you guys could share that ideas that you have for policies, programs that would help to ameliorate that kind of lack of equity.
I'll let Renata take a swing at that one first.
Yeah, I mean, again, I would say it's less important if we're, it's less important in the incentive space to be rigid about additionality. It's important in the carbon market space because we're, as a society, we're saying, or as a government, regulator, they're saying to one entity, go ahead and continue to add carbon to the atmosphere because a farmer across the state is going to sequester that much carbon for you. It's really important that we actually are, in that case, assuring additionality, because otherwise we won't get the emissions reductions that we need. We have to make sure that it is new carbon that's being stored. In the case of a government incentives program, there are lots of organic producers, for example, who are participating in the Healthy Soils program because they want to do something new. They want to, augment what they're already doing. They maybe want to do more or better or more acreage or a new sort of layer on a new practice like a hedgerow or something. So the practice itself does have to still be new on the acreage that they're applying to do it on. Because we do still, even with the incentives program, we want to see those carbon reductions. But there doesn't have to be a one-to-one correlation between, every dollar spent and a ton of carbon sequestered or CO2 emissions reduced. There's more room to, to package together practices and even with those folks who are out in front, early adopters, there's always more they can be doing on their property to improve their systems. Like the Phil Foster story I told, he's still trying to figure out how to continually improve.
Yeah, I don't have a ton more to add on that, but I do think it is a big issue that we hear about quite a bit, and I think that's because we have, our membership across the country, frankly, and other state farm bureaus even, they're very proud of their track record on sustainability, having either used state or federal cost share programs, which means they're also paying part of the bill, or doing their own work right outside of government programs. And so they feel like forever they've been working on this. The carbon markets, all the press out of all the ag publications, or even in mainstream media, is driving people to look into the options. And the farmers who are looking into the options are just by nature these early adopters. They're the ones that are saying, oh, what is this? Yeah. Well, and then they were getting frustrated when they're like, I don't have a place here, And so then the thing that we hear about is that, well, the way this is being set up in a private market, the money, the quid pro quo, the back and forth, what you have to give to get something is not going to be a good fit to incentivize someone who hadn't been incentivized to do it to date in things we know. So, when we look at this, I think we are, just like our policy said, we're supportive of the concept of a market-based solution. We generally are over maybe like a regulatory approach. However, we are looking at a suite of things to kind of meet people wherever they are. And that would include our government conservation programs, Farm Bill site types of programs, or things that we support at the state level. It would include that. It would include maybe some crop insurance rebate sort of things. And then it may also be these private markets, but everything may not be a fit for every producer. So, almost looking at it as a set of options to meet people where they are.
Great, thank you so much. We've hit the top of the next hour, but I want to thank both of the speakers and all of our participants for joining us today. I learned a lot from both of you, and I invite people again to visit our discussion board if questions come up for you. We'll try and get them answered. So thank you, Renata, and thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Claire, good to meet you, Lauren.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.